Hi, everybody. Today we're going to review triangles a little bit more and explore again how to find the area of a triangle. I want you to make sure that you have a scratch sheet of paper, something to write with, and a calculator. Now remember, when we are finding the area, we're finding the space inside of a figure. When you were in elementary school, you probably had figures like this where you would look at the shape, we'd look at this triangle, and we would count the boxes inside. You'd say one, two, three, four, five. Well, there's six full boxes, but then what do I do with these little partial pieces? Well, what we can do is we can actually, mathematicians figured out that a triangle is actually just half of a parallelogram. A rectangle is a type of parallelogram. So if you were to find the area of this entire rectangle that is right here for part A, if you had to find that entire area, you could count up that there is a total of 16 squares. Now, a shortcut for that would be to say that there's one, two, three, four, and one, two, three, four. And we know that a parallelogram, we take our base times our height and multiply to get 16. But when I want to find the area of the triangle of only this part of the parallelogram, you can see that it is half of the parallelogram. A triangle is half of a parallelogram. So to find the area of a triangle, need to take what I used and multiply that by 1/2. So half of 16 is equal to 8. And since I don't know the label, it would be 8 units squared. If you look at any one of these triangles that are here, they are all half of a parallelogram. Let's extend B. If we look at the parallelogram, if we look at that parallelogram formed by triangle B, you can see it's a 3 by 4. And so 3 multiplied by 4 is equal to 12. But the triangle is not the entire length. That triangle is half of that. So 3 times 4 is 12, but half of 12 is 6. So the area for B is 6 units squared. Go ahead and try a couple of these other triangles. Remember that a triangle is equal to half of a parallelogram. Because a parallelogram is your base multiplied by your height, your triangle, the area for a triangle is going to be 1/2 base times height. This is what you saw in the video from yesterday. So let's put all of this together in a one-page notes. We remember that from our last page, area of a triangle is 1/2 base multiplied by height. Now, if you don't want to do fractions, we also know that 1/2 is the same as 0.5. So it doesn't matter if you do 0.5 times base times height, because this is 1/2, or if you do it as a fraction. These both mean the same thing. Remember the key thing that B stands for base and H stands for height. And a key point at the bottom, the height makes a 90-degree angle with the base. It's like when you go to the doctor and they have to measure how tall you are, you have to stand up really straight. You can't go leaning back on the wall for them to measure how tall you are. You've got to put your feet all the way up against the corner and you are standing straight up against the floor. You're making a 90-degree angle to see how high you measure your height. Okay, our three triangles that we have here. We have a base. We have a base there. Now, the height, if I look at this side, does this make a 90-degree angle with the base? No. What about this one? Does this make a 90-degree angle with the base? No. The 90-degree angle of the height is often drawn in and shown with that little square there. That would be what your height is measured with. Now, let's look at the triangle and the bottom left. Here we have a base. I'm going to label that a base. Does this side make a 90-degree angle with the base? No. What about this side? Does that make a 90-degree angle with the base? No. So sometimes the height is shown outside the triangle with a dotted line because it's not actually part of the triangle. It's just information that's needed to use to calculate the area. Let's look at the last triangle. I can see that I have a 90-degree angle right there. So right away, I know this is my base. And I'm going to label that with a B. And I know that this is my height. So when I am doing this, I'm going to take my base. Look at all my bases right there. Those are my bases. And I'm going to use that in my multiplication. I'm going to take my height, which is the 90-degree angle. They all have that blue that box to show the height. I'm using that. But don't forget that no matter whether you use fractions or decimals, you need to include the half because we know that a triangle is half of a parallelogram. So let's have you just watch me do these two examples. I'm going to look for the base and the height. I'm going to look for where there's a 90-degree angle. And I see a little 90-degree angle right here, which means 8 is going to be the height and 12 is going to be the base. Because I like to, if I'm using a calculator, I'm going to use my decimal form of 1/2. And I am going to take 1/2, multiply that by 8, and then multiply that by 12. I know what's half of 8, 4. So then 4 times 12 is 48. My label would be 48 inches squared. The yellow triangle to the right. I see this 90-degree angle with this horizontal line. So I know that 12 is going to be the height and 20 is the base. I'm going to use my half as a decimal because a triangle is half of a parallelogram. And I'm going to multiply that by the base, multiply that by the height. Now, what is half of 20? 10. And what's 10 times 12? 120. There's no label here, so I'm going to use the generic label of units squared. And that, boys and girls, is how you use the formula area equals 1/2 base multiplied by height. Let's do number 1 together. I need to find that 90-degree angle, which is right here. Now, what two sides make those 90-degree angles? The 6 is going to be one of those sides, and so is the 5. So those are the numbers I'm using. Sometimes in math, they give you extra information. I don't need to know the 12 and I don't need to know the 7 because those are not the base and the height. So I'm going to take my half and multiply it by the base and then multiply it by the height. What is half of 6? 3. And 3 times 5 is 15. My label would be 15 feet squared. Now, you can also use a calculator to calculate these areas. I would like you to find the area for problem number 2. To find that area, you should have taken half and multiplied that by 25 and then multiplied that by 18. When you multiply those numbers all together, you will get an area of 225 units squared. Go ahead and find the area for problem 3. You should have done 1/2 multiplied by 6 multiplied by 7. When you multiply those three numbers together, you will get an area of 21 centimeters squared. Go ahead and find the area for number 4. Number 4 would have been 1/2 multiplied by your base of 4 and your height of 7. And when you multiply those together, you get 14 centimeters squared. All right, here's one that is a little bit tricky. Remember that our area is only half of our base multiplied by height. I only need 2 numbers, but there's 4 here, so there's going to be some extra information. If you wanted to solve this, remember our base and our height always make that 90-degree angle. So the two sides that make that 90-degree angle are the base and the height. You should have done 1/2 times 12 multiplied by 4. And when you calculate that, you would get an area of 24 units squared. Last problem. Let's have you find the area of this triangle. There was some extra information. Once again, we're only looking for that 90-degree angle, so those two sides that make that 90-degree angle, we can see that I'm going to take that half, don't forget that half, multiply it by the base of 24 and the height of 7. When you multiply those, you get 84 inches squared. Great job. There is a quizzes game that you can play for some additional practice with triangles and area. Have a great day, everyone.